Yeah, that was a pretty good fade. Nick, I'm sure you've been following how I do some DJ work over there in Ibiza with some of those cats, Skrillex, Diplo, Getta, not Bieber. But yeah, it had kind of a streak where I hadn't, I kind of lost my touch with the fades, but Cindy helped me out, so I'm back. Anyway, this
That
is the
was a good
scary.
one. That was a good fade. I like that.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. This is the Scary Alvarez podcast. I'm, of course, Scary Alvarez, Wine Island enjoyer, Sherry Wine destroyer, Jake's grandpa, and Cindy's plus one when she'll have me. And I've been doing this almost as long as Fran McCaffrey stares at referees after there's a call he doesn't like. So this is good. We're going on 18 months here with this podcast, and have a very special guest today to talk some topical things. Nick Osen with 247 Sports. Introduce yourself. I'm sure 95% of my viewers slash listeners know who you are, but this is your chance to sort of, punch that up a little bit and say hi to my crowd.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Scary. It's great to be here. Obviously, we've messaged a little bit, kind of here and there for a while, but first time on the show. So, like you mentioned, Nick Osen with 247 Sports. I'm a Wisconsin grad. Have been really in sports journalism for about as long as I've kind of been in the workforce. Really since college. Spent a couple years out at ESPN, which was awesome. That was kind of during the heart of COVID, though. Missed the Midwest. Was pretty far away from my family and things of that nature. So I got connected with 247 Sports. I was at Iowa State for about 20, 21 months, just under 2 full years. And then I was able to make the move here, kind of back home, basically about 20 minutes from where I grew up in Wanakee. So I've been back and on the Wisconsin beat for, I think it's been about 13, 14 months, so a little bit over a year, and enjoying that. It's certainly keeping me busy and happy to be on the show with you today.
Yeah, great. Good to have you, of course. And wow, I mean, so you were at ESPN. Did did you ever get formally reprimanded for talking about the Big Ten? Was that a thing? Was
No,
there any
no,
actual memo?
no reprimands for me. I think I was pretty well liked, well behaved there, I would say. But no, definitely none of that.
Sounds good. And I'm very, very heartened to see you make a city upgrade from Ames to Madison. That is a refreshing. I know you're not going to diss on Iowa State, and certainly they have a great basketball program there with PJ and all that stuff. So hey, we all move up in life, and kind of like when I greatly elevated schools from Notre Dame to Wisconsin, we all ascend. So that's what we do.
I will say this, and a lot of fans, they're at Iowa State still kind of follow me a little bit. I got some birthday wishes. It's been incredible to be home, really, because it's kind of where I grew up in Madison, one of the best college towns. But if you ever get the chance to meet some of the folks, in that state, good people, similar to Wisconsin, a lot of similarities there, Scary, in terms of how
Yeah,
people really are passionate and kind of support each other.
they're good people. Iowa is like Wisconsin without every cool thing we have in our state. So I always have a little bit of, but they're salt of the earth. I get it. They're good folk down there, and really, I can't even muster hate for Iowa. Like for their even when they bludgeon us in football, shockingly, like they did this past fall. I just don't have the hate for them like I might for a school several hours to their north in Minneapolis, a commuter school called Minnesota Golden Gophers, and their most mid coach in college football history, PJ Fleck. Anyway, we're going to turn to a couple topics today. And by the way, and certainly for Nick's stuff as well, please like and subscribe, especially subscribe. I have like 20-year-old like Bulgarian graduation ceremonies that pop up in your next videos on YouTube before me sometimes. It's some wild stuff with these algorithms. So every subscription matters, and I really appreciate you all. So let's start with the elephant in the room. And I know you have your journalistic shackles on, so to speak, but I want to talk about Xavier Lucas a little bit, and then we'll get into Wisconsin basketball. For someone who has been on an isolated wine island without any sort of internet or connections, Xavier Lucas is a Wisconsin Badger, former player. I think we can say that now. A cornerback, very well groomed and talented player out of South Florida, and he entered his name into the portal or tried to in December, and Wisconsin, of course, blocked that for reasons we'll get into. And now we're in a situation where it's all kind of coming out. And I've done some shows on this in the past, but not, let me give you my thoughts real quick on this, and then I'll open it up to you. But we have a situation where there are now, and this is based on reporting that has been done, as well as statements from both the Big Ten and the University of Wisconsin. But it appears there were not one but two agreements, one of which a formal contract, the other a memorandum of understanding, where Lucas had pledged his loyalty, for lack of a better term, with Wisconsin. 2-year deal, apparently, with a memorandum of understanding, and that was based on some stuff that was going to happen this summer with the Big Ten Conference, and then there was also a contract with the Wisconsin Collective.
Mhm.
Someone from Miami got to him, whether it was a booster, whether it was the school itself, and then when he was down over break, he decided he wanted to leave the Badgers. Some reporting is saying after accepting some money. I'm not sure. I don't have those documents in front of me, but we have a big mess, and it was made even worse by a gentleman named Darren Heitner, who is Lucas's Better Call Saul, for lack of any better term, Saul Goodman. And this is a guy who's doing victory laps now because his client didn't actually go to Miami through the portal. He just kind of enrolled. So it's a big mess, and the reality is Wisconsin, as I mentioned, and the Big Ten have both entered pretty strong statements saying that not Miami tampered. Wisconsin said that the Big Ten did not, and that this ain't good. And Miami has been dead silent on this. And it's no big shock that Miami has been dead silent on this because they were caught tampering. I'm sure that Wisconsin has the goods or they wouldn't have said anything about it. And also, they have the Big Ten wagging a finger at them. And they're thinking of the future of college football, where their school might go, and they're going, OSHIT. I don't want the Big Ten, the big bad Big Ten mad at me because maybe that's a conference I might go to in the future. I just said a lot, Nick. I'm gonna give you the floor here to give me your thoughts on this. But what an absolute mess.
Yeah, scary. It's a really, I think, going back to what would that have been? I want to say just around a month ago, kind of when things really, started and got percolating a little bit. It's just kind of an interesting, uh, unfortunate situation, really, depending on the way you look at it. But while I haven't been surprised, I've been pretty, impressed and respect how I think Wisconsin has really handled this. I don't think that they were looking to just jump and, make a statement, right? I know many people were kind of waiting, but I think it was really smart that we'll just say the Badgers, Wisconsin as kind of the program and entity really just took their time. Obviously, they've got some very, smart, in-depth, I think, lawyers and people involved within this. And, I started to kind of hear buzz of what really the issue was within a day or two of when kind of Xavier Lucas tried to enter the portal. And so I think I'd had a pretty good grasp, but just with some of this stuff, you need to be really careful about what you put out there. You mentioned kind of some of the things expected of me as a journalist. So I didn't say really, a ton. I think it's obvious, and this is a reason that Wisconsin was kind of so methodical with this, that something was going on that shouldn't have been, obviously, with Miami. Now, obviously, he's trying to be there. I think it was interesting. Heitner was kind of the guy, Darren Heitner, I believe. I don't know much about him, but it was just interesting. All the sound, all the noise was kind of coming from that side. And Wisconsin was just really playing this close to the vest. And I think kind of going throughout the process, I think in the end, this is just simply kind of a projection. I do think Miami will look to be in the wrong on this. I think it kind of speaks volumes that the Big Ten coming out so strongly, not just in support of obviously their program with the Badgers, but just kind of the level and magnitude of that Big Ten statement. I found pretty revealing and pretty strong, Scary. So I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I think it's just really interesting also from what I kind of gathered early on. Like, I thought Xavier liked it here. Obviously, he intended to come back and be with this program with kind of signing some of those things. So it'll be really intriguing to see how this plays out. I don't expect something crazy quick, but like I mentioned, generally just an unfortunate thing, I think, from the start. And I do think it'll look to be the Badgers correct in the end, just with how they handled this and kind of the levels of of people really involved, kind of from the top down within this situation.
Yeah, that's all well said, Nick, and I agree with you, and I'm a little more strident in the way I say things. Obviously, on this, I don't have the journalistic shackles that you do, which I respect. Um, the reality is, I just and you're right. I had implored Wisconsin in a previous podcast. Implored them. Y'all got to say about a week ago. Y'all got to say something, and eventually they did. And I think maybe it was just one too many times where Heitner was running his clam hole on Twitter, and him doing a victory lap is interesting while Miami's saying nothing. It's I'm saying this. I'm not attributing this to you. I know you're a journalist. I'm telling you, Miami knows they were caught tampering. They know there's documentation of that. They know it, and not tampering. I think everyone tampers. I hate to say that, like, oh, everyone does it. There's something extraordinary about the way Miami was operating in this particular situation. And the objective evidence is Wisconsin has had probably 50 players transfer out. There's never been an issue with any of them. And it isn't just
Mhm.
because Lucas is talented. And along the lines of, Lucas, I think he was maybe caught in the crossfire here a little bit. I've been very sympathetic to him as a student athlete. I think he's probably gotten some bad advice, perhaps some parental things that are beyond the purview of what we know. But my counter argument to that is only this. He is a 19, 20-year-old adult now, and he's making or will be making large sums of money as a professional athlete in this. So I think we got to be a little careful to infantilize Xavier Lucas and his role in this. I don't think it's important necessarily to define it, but I'm not giving him a total free pass here, and not that anyone cares what I think. I've generally been very supportive of student athletes with NIL. I'm so happy they can get money. Like, I think it was just the thumb was so on the scale for schools and coaches versus players, and I've loved the fact that these guys are getting paid now. But I think you know this as well as anyone. It cannot continue like this to the point where players are just saying, F you, NCAA, I'm just going to transfer anyway. The portal is obviously a sham, a joke. Why would any other player enter the portal now?
Well, and that is a potential long-term positive that I think, if I recall, I mean, there have been a lot of statements kind of going on like of late, but I believe in one of the Wisconsin statements, or kind of at the bottom, or it might have been the Big Ten, there was just kind of more of a reference to, needing more clear governance, and kind of focused leadership with an issue like this. And I do think that's going to be a potential positive, because I don't think it can go on like this. Now, rev share is going to come into effect, and I think that'll be certainly a positive for, conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC, that I do know are going to find success within that. And obviously, these programs and these universities are going to be positively reflected with some of that money. But I'm all for, like, truly NIL. I do wish it was a little bit less pay for play, and more kind of some of the things that I've seen was, I mean, Wisconsin has done great things. I've seen other programs, like, just in terms of kind of some of the fun, we'll say, collective agreements, and just some of the fun advertisements like you see. I think a lot of that goes to good use. I love how some of it is kind of involved with volunteering, and then you can get, like, even more money and things of that nature. But there needs to be some consistent levels of, I think, focus and governance, like I mentioned. I just feel like, I mean, man, I hope it doesn't get much worse, but, like, I can tell you from a personal view, a lot of the most passionate fans that we have on our great website and message boards, like, they miss a lot of kind of the traditional aspects. And it's not like, oh, they have an issue with players being paid, but just the consistent kind of moving, and you don't get to know the players as well. And programs are always changing. I do think there's a level of truth to that. So I hope kind of some of that, gets figured out. I do love that Wisconsin is still really trying to build from the high school classes and recruiting development there, which I think is a great thing, Scary. But we'll see. I mean, I feel like it's been said a lot these last couple of years, but the state of the game is in an interesting place. I think the passion and people watching are still very high. You look at some of the college football playoff numbers, people are tuning in. But I just wish, there'd be a little bit more collectiveness and cohesion within kind of the sport as a whole, is how I would say that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is a bit of a mess, and frankly, I think the optimal word is unsustainable. This model is unsustainable. It cannot continue where Wisconsin's entire NIL budget can be dwarfed by one Nike CEO guy, Phil Knight, with a stroke of his mouse with a wire transfer. It is such an unequal playing field, and yes, since Wisconsin is not one of the elite NIL teams, maybe I have a little bit of a bias in this, but you are going to see the same teams in the college football playoff semifinals the same types of teams every year. The Texas Longhorns, Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, the big spenders are going to be there. And, maybe it was under the table before and we just didn't understand it. But I just think salary cap is kind of a weird way of looking at it. But look at the equality. Teams like Milwaukee Bucks can win an NBA title. Where in Major League Baseball, which I think is a better analogy to the way college football is going right now, it's the big spenders who are going to almost always be there. The Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees. It's just unfair. Whereas other sports with revenue sharing, there's a chance for lower market teams to do it. And Wisconsin is frankly a mid to low market team. It's just the way it is right now. So I do feel like we need our mega boosters who pony up more for NIL. I do think we're going to learn a lot more about how much that needs to be to make us competitive. Because as great as these recruiting classes that Luke Fickle is getting, and these are all-timer Wisconsin classes, 10 four-star recruits. I'm not sure if Chris ever did that, but maybe he did it one time with a very different model of recruiting where they were just getting the highest stars for a while there with Khalid. I feel like these are really good classes, but we're actually the gap between Ohio State's classes and Wisconsin's classes in 24 and 25 were larger than they used to be, which is just insane when Wisconsin's a top 25 program in recruiting. So that's all well said. I want to switch focus real quick here to talk about Wisconsin basketball, a
Hmm.
real sport not involving Xavier Lucas. Uh, big road win at USC. Uh, got a little close there a couple times in the second half, but that Wisconsin basically controlled it, and without the benefit of their top scorer um, scoring a point in the entire game, John Tanji.
Hmm.
Got UCLA tomorrow. What's your? We just checked in number 18. What is Nick? What's your thoughts on the state of Greg Gard's program right now and their prospects going forward in this season?
Scary. I think the program, excuse me, quite honestly, is in a really good place. I mean, I know that a lot of people, I'm going to go kind of macro to micro levels. I know that a lot of people had kind of their questions or maybe doubts. I mean, it was understandable that there was some concern, not about Greg Gard, but just about kind of Wisconsin basketball in the spot around, it was like April or May when all the big names were leaving. A couple big names, I should say, not all of them by any means, but I know people were worried, kind of like what we were just talking about football with just some of the state of the portal and NIL. I mean, the money is just insane in some of the hoops transfer stuff. That being said, and this is one thing I was actually just talking to some family and friends about the job that Greg Gard has done and the staff. Like, they grab a few transfers, they get the right guys, but they were able to retain many key players. Steve, Max, Blackwell, Winter, Kamari. And you put all that together and just the job that this staff has done. Now, I'm writing a little bit more on it this upcoming week, but I think it has been really, really impressive. I think they should get a lot of credit for that. And on a micro level, look, I think this is a team. I'm not going to say anything crazy. I've made sure all year because some fans got on me a little bit about my optimism with the football team, which I will still stand by, based on some things that we saw at camp. But I always said 12th in the Big Ten, that's way too low for this basketball team, right? And then you're looking throughout the Big Ten, and it's like, okay, there's talent. There is talent. There's some really good teams, but this conference is pretty wide open. And I think you see that in this week's poll, Scary. I want to say there are like 6 Big Ten teams between 9 and 22 or 9 and 23. So obviously there's a lot pretty close within it. I feel like while it's going to be tough to kind of be able to win the conference, just because there have been a couple losses, Michigan State hasn't lost a game in conference, and there's still some really tough road games for these Badgers coming up. finishing top 3, 4, 5 in the conference is very doable. I personally have Wisconsin as a 4 seed. I know a couple of my friends that do bracketology have them there. They're really between a 4 and a 5 right now. I think as long as you finish between a 4 and a 6, ideally a 4 and a 5, you've got a great chance to get to that second weekend. And that obviously means a Sweet 16 berth, Scary. And I think that would be terrific, not just for the program, not just for the fan base, but for Greg Gard and the staff, because I think they've done a really good job. And while there is such a focus still on the regular season and what's done there, postseason success is important. And I expect this older kind of veteran-led group to be able to achieve some of that this year.
Yeah, agreed. I think, not I think, I know because it was me. I was similarly optimistic about this group preseason. And maybe with some different pieces as the people who would do it. I wasn't like, and John Tonje is going to be the most amazing transfer in history. But I did say this was a team that could finish fairly high in the Big Ten. I eviscerated the Big Ten media for picking them 12th. I thought that was preposterous. And I understand there are 18 teams now, but my recollection is that is the lowest I have ever seen them in the modern era since they got good again.
Mhm.
Um, you just knew it wasn't going to be, they weren't going to be 12. They have some of their hardest games still left. I think they're in a good, not to say any game is easy in the Big Ten because it's not. We saw with Michigan this past week and with USC. You can always get beaten because there really isn't an easy game. And Minnesota just proved it. I mean, the
Yeah.
last place or second last place team in the conference can beat a quality team.
Yeah, Michigan
But
State is, or I'm sorry, Minnesota, just to add, is better than their record, I do believe.
yeah, agreed, they are. And I feel a little gross rooting for a Minnesota team, but I did. Um, this past week, I was actually quite pleased with that upset. But yeah, so I had optimism for Wisconsin, and Greg Gard. I've gone on. I've done multiple podcasts about my feelings on Gard, and it's never blindly saying what he does is great. It was fair to criticize some of the stuff that has happened the last few years, but I felt good about what he did in the offseason, and I not famously, but famous in my circle after all the transfers out. After AJ Store heads to Kansas and Chucky heads to Louisville. But before we brought the transfers back on our side, I said he deserves the chance to see what this team looks like at the end of the transfer period before declaring Badger basketball dead and before saying you need to fire the guy. Well, look
Oh
what he
God.
did. Look what he did. And it's not to say
And
that,
if I could just add, Scary,
yeah,
I get people from an outside. I mean, I don't even get all the portal info and ins and outs because that stuff can be quiet. But I'll go as far as saying none of that was on Guard. Truly, I mean, when you're losing players for the amounts of money that they're getting, it's just not sustainable for almost any head coach. Like there are 7 or 8 with programs that maybe could have consistently matched all that. And it also comes down to choices, right? Because then if you pay somebody $650,000, $700,000, then you got to increase things within the room. And just wanted to note that. But yeah, without a doubt, an agreement that he certainly deserved the chance. And I think he's proving to many that not only did he deserve that, but I think he's a hell of a college basketball coach, even in this ever-changing era right now. I really think he's handled these things with relative ease and a lot of success so far, Scary. I really do.
yeah, he's adapting pretty well, given what we know. And what we know is he does not have the same budget that some of these other teams in the Big Ten and in NCAA basketball have. But I sense no panic after those players left and no bitterness. Look, AJ Store, depending on who you believe, got something approaching $1 million. We weren't going to offer the same amount as Kansas. But sometimes the grass isn't greener. Now, he may have more success with that Kansas team this year than Wisconsin. I don't know, but he's a bench player, averaging 7.5 a game, not getting anywhere near the run he had for Wisconsin. Maybe he's happier there. I don't know. And this isn't I told you so to AJ Store. I want to be clear here. I'm not second guessing a kid who takes $1 million to go to an elite basketball program. I get it, no problem. But it'd be very hard to find someone who would take AJ Store right now over John Tanji. I don't mean just because of the economics. Tanji is more responsible defensively. USC wasn't his his master stroke, certainly with that game. I'm not sure he might have been not feeling well or something, but he's been a really solid piece in this puzzle. And it's okay. Chucky Hepburn, same thing. I happen to like Chucky. I like his dad. I wish nothing but the best. I've taken heat for this, for saying nothing but the best. Chucky got the kind of money that a 4-year Wisconsin graduate who is not an athlete, if they got that their first year out of college, it's almost unprecedented. It's the kind of you put in the bank and you live off the interest kind of money. Good for him. And he's on a good team, and he's a big part of the good team. I have no problem with Chucky Hepburn leaving, but Greg Gard had a plan, and it wasn't. Don't get me wrong. Put Chucky Hepburn on this team, we're a top 10 team. Okay, so I don't want to say that losing him didn't matter, but I wasn't bitter about it from the perspective of the kid. And I'm just saying, but getting back to our initial discussion with Xavier Lucas, it just would be nice if we could get into an environment where Wisconsin could compete with a team like Louisville in terms of NIL. I just think that would be great. But that's all water on the bridge, and I really like the cut of this Wisconsin team's jib. I think they're going to be a factor in the Big Ten. I agree with you. Winning it's going to be a big ask now, and they have some really tough games coming up in February. But as I said in my pod, I don't see losing 6 out of 7 in this team's future like we did last year.
Mm-mm.
I think they just have enough dudes in that room where if one guy's off or the 3-pointers aren't falling, there's a way that they can make it happen. And yeah, they're probably going to drop a couple in a row at some point. The rest of the way it happens, no big deal. But I've had the Illinois game at home late in the season circled. That is the litmus test game. You need to put that dog down in one of the games you play them. You haven't beat them since 2019. That is the measuring stick for the rest of the season. It's not.
It
It's
has
not the
been a
game in
while.
Breslin. Yeah, it's the game at
It,
home with Illinois.
and maybe this is just the optimist in me because I'm relatively close to this program, obviously with coverage and things. I still think you can have a hell of a year without it, but Scary, I get where you're coming from because they are a good program. I think Underwood's a good coach, a heck of a recruiter, and that they always seem to kind of come together. But you're right. I mean, I got to check the date on that one. I have most of the games memorized. I don't remember exactly when that one is, but that's one you need the crowd rocking, right? Because when I went down to the game in Champaign, that crowd was really, really impressive. Like, make it feel like it matters. And the crowd at the KC this year has been solid, not still what I expect. And I do implore fans to continue to be better with that. But that'd be really nice just to kind of end that streak. Illinois, they've got a high ceiling. They've got a lot of NBA guys. But I think, like we both agree, Wisconsin has a couple future pros in my eyes, whether NBA or obviously the highest levels of overseas or G League. But the way they play together, man, and I will say I noted it in October, so I'm happy that I was right on that. It's just an unselfish group, man. They're playing for each other. They're playing for Wisconsin. They all seem to love the staff, and it's exciting. I mean, I've got great things obviously in life outside of work, but like this team has been fun to just kind of cover and be around. And we're sitting here in technically still mid to late January. I'm hoping, Scary, we're still talking about this team a full 2.5 months from now. I really do think they can do some damage in March.
Agreed. I agreed. And it's been fun seeing the development of some players who stuck around. The Kamar McGee story is just it makes my heart full. It's just to see a kid who could have transferred when he wasn't getting the playing time, and he stuck with the program. Such a great attitude, fun to watch. Absolute maestro from 3 this year. That's
Yeah,
been kind
he's
of the
been
development.
awesome there.
With the development of players like Nolan Winter and the rebound of Steve Crowell, excuse the pun, from some of those dark times earlier in the season, the zero rebound game against Illinois, I believe, he has been a different player. Not a different player than we've seen at various points in his career, but he's playing with more fire. And that's a credit to Greg Gard, who didn't throw him under the bus, but called him out in a way where it was master psychology. It was just good
It
stuff.
needed to
And
be done,
yeah,
and Gard handled it great, as did Steve. I mean, he was to me the number one reason. Well, I guess the win streak's still going, but for I think those first 5 games or so of the streak, he was my number one guy I was writing about. And
yeah.
obviously, you see Tanje in there. Blackwell seems like he's turned the corner. Winter, I think, is playing like a future pro 2-3 years down the line, but It's been fun, man, and I really hope that it gets to continue for a while. I really do.
Me too. Me too. And I feel like a couple weeks ago I wasn't going to mention Max Klesman. He looked like last year's Max Klesman, although last year did have highs and lows. He looked like Max Klesman's ceiling against USC.
He
We
was
saw
huge.
that shooting, the creative shooting, the no fear as far as going in the rack. Some really solid defensive plays. And this is a guy coming off an injury, a cheap shot by Rutgers freshman
Yeah.
sensation. Garbage stuff, didn't get suspended. I don't know what happened. I don't know how you could possibly say that that wasn't a suspendable play, but that's a story for another time. But anyway, we could talk forever on this team. But Nick, thanks for so much for jumping on. Really appreciate your insight, your calm and measured takes on controversial things like the I'm a little less so myself. You have your professional constraints, but it's okay to be optimistic and also be an objectively solid journalist. And I think you walk that line very well. And hey, don't be a stranger. Love to have you on and do some follow-ups on this basketball squad, which I agree, anything short of a Sweet 16 would feel disappointing this year. I'll say it.
No, thank you so much, man, for having me. Truly, I'm glad we did this. And I'll say right now to you and our listeners, we can plan to be like another show kind of during this March run. I've been very grateful, I will say, because I think the community is very friendly, to people like you and some of the other great shows kind of around Wisconsin. I love the opportunities to jump on. I really like kind of supporting all of us, and it's a fun time, I think, with the basketball team and some of this football recruiting. And they got a great portal hall too for football. Maybe we'll talk some spring ball as well. But thank you so much for the opportunity, and let's continue a great year, my friend.
Yeah, I agreed. And wow, I didn't even beyond the transfer portal, I didn't even talk about football. So there's some, which is a very out of character thing for me. But anyway, it's great to have you, Nick. All best. Stay warm, and we'll talk soon.